In 2010, thousands of people who had never met each other suddenly remembered the same wrong fact. Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 1980s. They remembered his funeral. They remembered the news coverage. Except he was alive, and wouldn't die for another 3 years. Was it a mistake in millions of memories, or a mistake in reality itself? For as long as people have compared memories, they've noticed something eerie. Sometimes the world doesn't match what they're sure they remember. Logos change. Movie lines shift. Buildings move. Scientists call it false memory. The internet calls it something scarier, a glitch in the simulation. This video walks through the strangest, best documented reality glitches ever reported, from harmless brain tricks to genuinely unexplained physics, building from the silly to the deeply unsettling. It started with one woman. Paranormal researcher Fiona Broom was chatting with strangers at a convention in 2009 when the subject of Nelson Mandela came up. She mentioned his death in prison. The people around her nodded along. They remembered it too. The funeral coverage. The riots. Winnie Mandela's tearful speech. There was just one problem. None of it happened. Mandela was released from prison in 1990, became president of South Africa in 1994, and didn't die until December 2013. Broom built a website to document the phenomenon and gave it a name that would outlive her original theory, the Mandela Effect. Her own explanation was wild. She suggested parallel universes were bleeding into each other, and a version of reality where Mandela died in the 80s had somehow merged with ours. Psychologists had a far less exciting answer. Confabulation, the way human memory doesn't record events like a camera, but reconstructs them every time you recall them, mixing in guesses, assumptions, and other people's stories until a fake memory feels just as real as a true one. But here's the retention hook. The Mandela case turned out to be just the first domino. Once people started comparing notes online, they found dozens more, and some of them are much harder to explain away. If you grew up reading children's books in the 80s or 90s, there's a good chance you remember a family of talking bears called the Berenstein Bears. Say it out loud. Feels right, doesn't it? Except go check a copy today, and the spine reads Berenstein, with an A, not an E. This isn't a small internet joke. Tens of thousands of people insist they remember the E spelling distinctly. On VHS tapes, on lunchboxes, on the actual books they read as kids. Some claim to own merchandise with the wrong spelling, though none has ever been verified. Trademark records show the books have been Berenstein since Stan and Jan Berenstein, the actual authors, whose real surname was Berenstein, published the first one in 1962. So why do so many people remember it differently? Linguists point to a phenomenon of pattern completion. Stein is a vastly more common English suffix than Stein, Einstein, Frankenstein, Rubinstein, so your brain silently corrects an unusual word into a familiar shape every single time you read it, and you never notice the correction happening. Multiply that by millions of children reading the same book, and you get a fake collective memory so strong it survives seeing the real spelling in the mirror. But not every glitch has such a tidy explanation. Some of them get personal. Picture the Monopoly mascot, Rich Uncle Pennybags. Top hat, mustache, and, for a startling number of people, a monocle. Pull up the actual game box. He's never had one. Not in 1935, not now. And yet this is one of the most consistently misremembered images in Mandela Effect circles, cited alongside a nearly identical case. The Fruit of the Loom logo, which millions swear used to include a cornucopia, a horn overflowing with fruit, behind the stack of apples and grapes. It never did. Researchers have a name for this specific trap. Two unrelated visual tropes, monocled mascots like Mr. Peanut, cornucopias as a symbol of abundance, get spliced onto a similar-looking image in memory, because your brain isn't storing a photograph, it's storing a rough sketch with labels, and it fills gaps with whatever fits the theme. Mr. Peanut, notably, actually does wear a monocle, which may be exactly why so many people's brains merged the two mascots into one. Quick recap before we go further. So far, every glitch we've covered traces back to ordinary memory errors, pattern completion, trope splicing, and the brain filling gaps. Simple, if unsettling. But the next cases start getting into things that are much harder to write off as just memory. Let's move fast through 5 of the internet's favorite reality glitches, back to back. 1. The Sinbad Genie movie. Thousands of millennials swear a 90s movie called Shazam existed, starring comedian Sinbad as a genie. It's never existed. It's confused with two real, unrelated 90s films, Kazam, starring Shaquille O'Neal as a genie, and Sinbad's own comedic public persona. 2. Curious George's Tale. The beloved cartoon monkey has never had a tail. Real monkeys of his type wouldn't. Yet countless readers insist they remember one, because nearly every other cartoon monkey they've ever seen has one. 3. The fedora on the Monopoly guy already covered, but the same added accessory glitch shows up with Pikachu's tail, which people misremember having a black tip, when it's always been solid yellow. It may be borrowed from Raichu, Pikachu's evolved form, which does have a black-tipped tail. 4. Luke, I am your father. One of the most quoted movie lines in history. Except Darth Vader never says Luke. The actual line is no, I am your father. The misquote is so widespread it's been repeated in other movies, sitcoms, and even official Star Wars merchandise, reinforcing the false memory further with every repetition. 5. The volcano under the Statue of Liberty. A strange one. Thousands of people online insist the Sci-Fi Channel logo used to include a small volcano-shaped hill. It's just a plain landscape. No volcano, ever. 5 glitches down. Individually, harmless. But watch what happens when the glitch stops being about logos and lines from movies, and starts being about geography, actual, physical, real-world places that shouldn't be able to move. Ask someone to point to New Zealand on a map. Most people place it too far east or west of where their gut says it should be. A mundane fact of geography most people are just bad at. But there's a specific and much stranger version of this glitch tied to South America. A large number of people insist the continent used to sit further to the left on world maps, tucked more directly under North America, and that it has since shifted east relative to Africa. Cartographers have a mundane explanation. Most people's mental map of the world comes from the flattened Mercator projection used in classrooms for generations, which distorts landmasses near the poles and stretches things unevenly the further you get from the equator. So most people's intuitive sense of where continents are was never accurate to begin with. But there's a retention hook worth sitting with here. Geography glitches keep showing up specifically around borders and shapes that people were taught once, memorized as children, and never actively rechecked as adults, which is exactly the psychological condition under which false memories thrive best. And the next segment pushes that same vulnerability into something with real financial and legal consequences. In the world of stock trading, a glitch isn't a memory trick, it's measured in actual dollars, and it moves markets in seconds. On May 6, 2010, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped nearly 1,000 points in about 36 minutes, wiping out and then restoring almost $1 trillion of value before regulators could even react. It's remembered today as the flash crash. The cause, investigators eventually determined, was a large automated sell order interacting badly with high-frequency trading algorithms, creating a feedback loop where computers sold to other computers faster than any human could intervene. To traders watching their screens that day, it looked exactly like reality breaking, numbers not just falling, but falling in ways that made no mathematical sense, stocks like Accenture briefly trading for a single penny. It took the SEC nearly 5 months to publish a full explanation. In the meantime, the market glitched became the only phrase that felt adequate. That's the pattern building here. The deeper we go, the less these glitches are things you can laugh off as a bad memory, and the more they start looking like gaps in systems too complex for any one person, or any one algorithm, to fully see. Next, that same idea shows up in something even stranger. The software running underneath physical reality, according to some of the smartest people alive. In 2003, Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom published a formal argument that's since been debated by physicists, tech billionaires, and late-night dorm room conversations alike. Statistically, if any civilization anywhere ever develops the ability to run detailed simulations of conscious minds, and they run even a modest number of those simulations, then simulated minds would vastly outnumber real ones, meaning the odds favor you being one of the simulated. Elon Musk has publicly put the odds of us living in base reality, meaning not a simulation, at roughly 1 in billions. Physicists have gone looking for actual evidence, not just philosophy. In 2012, researchers at the University of Bonn proposed that if the universe were a simulation running on some kind of lattice, a discrete, pixel-like grid, rather than smooth continuous space, it should leave detectable fingerprints in the behavior of high-energy cosmic rays, specifically a subtle directional bias that a truly continuous universe shouldn't have. Here's the retention hook. No one has found that fingerprint yet. But yet is doing a lot of work in that sentence, and the fact that a serious, peer-reviewed test for a glitch in the code of the universe exists at all is where this stops being just internet folklore. Quick recap, we've moved from misremembered cartoons, to shifting maps, to a trillion-dollar stock market malfunction, to a real scientific test for whether reality itself is simulated. Every step up, the glitch has gotten less explainable. The next 4 segments go even further, into physics experiments that are not folklore, not opinion, and not resolved. If there's one experiment that's haunted physicists for over a century, it's this one. Fire particles, electrons, photons, doesn't matter, one at a time through 2 narrow slits toward a detector screen. If they behaved like tiny bullets, you'd expect 2 clean bands on the screen, one behind each slit. Instead, you get an interference pattern, alternating bands of high and low hits, the exact pattern you'd get from 2 overlapping waves. Somehow, a single particle, fired alone, with nothing to interfere with, behaves as if it went through both slits at once and interfered with itself. Then the actual glitch hits. Physicists added a detector to watch which slit each particle actually goes through. The instant you observe the particle's path, the interference pattern vanishes. The particles start behaving like simple bullets again. 2 bands, no wave pattern, purely because something is watching. Nothing about the setup changed except the presence of the measurement. Physicists call this the observer effect, and to this day there is no fully agreed upon explanation for why looking changes the outcome. It gets stranger. In 1978, physicist John Wheeler proposed a delayed choice version. What if you decide whether to measure the particle's path after it's already passed through the slits, but before it hits the screen? Experiments run in the 2000s confirmed it. The particle's past behavior changes retroactively based on a decision made after the fact. Not metaphorically. Measurably, repeatably, in labs around the world. This is the point in the video where glitch stops being a fun word for a wrong memory, and starts being the most literal, technical description available for a real result physicists still can't fully explain. Albert Einstein hated this one so much he tried for decades to prove it was wrong. Entangle 2 particles, link their properties together at the quantum level, then separate them, even by enormous distances, even light-years apart in theory. Measure one particle, and it instantly determines the state of the other. Faster than light could possibly carry the information between them. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance and spent years arguing it had to be an illusion, a mathematical loophole, anything other than reality actually working this way. In 1964, physicist John Bell devised a mathematical test, now called Bell's theorem, that could actually settle the argument experimentally, rather than philosophically. Starting in the 1970s and continuing through a landmark set of experiments in 2015 known as the loophole-free Bell tests, physicists ran the numbers. Einstein lost. Entanglement is real. 2 particles genuinely do appear to affect each other instantaneously across any distance, with no known mechanism carrying the signal. In 2022, the Nobel Prize in Physics went to 3 researchers, Alain Aspect, John Clauser, and Anton Zeilinger, specifically for confirming this glitch beyond reasonable doubt. The Nobel Committee's own language for it. They had proven the violation of what should, by classical logic, be impossible. But that wasn't even the strangest one. The next segment covers a real, documented incident where reality appeared to glitch in front of thousands of witnesses at once. Not in a lab, but in the sky. October 13, 1917, Fatima, Portugal. 3 shepherd children had spent months claiming the Virgin Mary was appearing to them, and had publicly predicted that on this specific date, a miracle would occur that everyone present could witness. As many as 70,000 people gathered in a field, many of them skeptics and journalists sent specifically to debunk the claim. According to newspaper accounts published within days, including by reporters from anti-clerical, explicitly non-religious papers, the sun appeared to change color, spin like a wheel, and dance in the sky, before appearing to plunge toward the earth, terrifying the crowd, then returning to its normal position. Witnesses reported their previously rain-soaked clothes were suddenly dry. No observatory anywhere on Earth recorded any actual solar anomaly that day. An object behaving as described would have been a global, catastrophic event, not a localized one visible to a single Portuguese field. The leading scientific explanation is a form of mass psychogenic phenomenon combined with retinal fatigue from staring at a bright sky. But that explanation has never fully satisfied historians, because it doesn't cleanly account for tens of thousands of people, including committed skeptics, independently describing the same specific sequence of movements. Whatever actually happened in that field, it remains one of the most witnessed unexplained events of the 20th century. A glitch experienced not by one confused person, but by a crowd the size of a small city, all at once. Quick recap before the final stretch. We've gone from a misremembered book title, to unresolved quantum physics, to tens of thousands of witnesses in a field in Portugal. Every case has escalated. The next two segments are where this video's darkest and most personal material lives. Near-death experience researchers have logged thousands of cases where patients, clinically flatlined with no measurable brain activity, later report detailed, verifiable knowledge of events happening in the room, or even in other rooms, during the exact window their brain should have been incapable of forming any memory at all. The AWARE study, a large multi-hospital research project on cardiac arrest survivors published in 2014, documented one case where a patient accurately described the specific actions and conversations of the medical team resuscitating him, including details from a location he should not have been able to perceive from his physical position on the table. Lead researcher Dr. Sam Parnia was careful in how he framed the findings. He stopped well short of claiming proof of an afterlife, but he also stated plainly that the case could not be dismissed as hallucination or coincidence, because verified, external facts were being accurately reported from a period of documented, flatlined brain inactivity. In ordinary terms, for a window of time, according to every instrument in the room, this man's brain was not running. And yet something was still recording. This is the segment where reality glitch stops being a fun phrase for internet trivia. This is a documented medical case where the machine that produces human consciousness appears, by every available measurement, to have been switched off, while consciousness itself continued. But there's one more case, and it's the one this entire video has been building toward. In 1999, a young boy named James Leininger began having violent nightmares, thrashing and screaming airplane crash in his sleep before he was even 3 years old. As he learned to talk, he began describing, unprompted, specific details. Flying a fighter plane off a boat he called Natoma, being shot down by the Japanese, and a friend named Jack Larson. His parents, who had no interest in reincarnation and were reportedly disturbed by the claims, eventually did the research almost as a way to disprove him. What they found matched with unsettling precision. The USS Natoma Bay was a real aircraft carrier that served in the Pacific during World War II. Among its pilots was a young man named James Huston Jr., who was shot down and killed near Iwo Jima in 1945, and one of his real, documented, surviving squadron mates was a man named Jack Larson. The boy had also, before ever being told the pilot's name, drawn pictures of air combat and signed them James 3. Skeptical researchers point out the boy's father was an amateur pilot who had exposed him early to aviation media, which could plant fragments a small child might reassemble into a story. Believers, and even some researchers with academic credentials from institutions like the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, point out that the specificity, a real ship, a real pilot, a real named squadron mate, all confirmed only after the child mentioned them, is difficult to fully explain through media exposure alone. Neither side has definitively won this case, more than 2 decades later. It remains one of the most documented and hardest to dismiss cases of its kind in the world, and it's the perfect place for this video to end, because it's the one glitch that isn't about a wrong word, or a wrong memory, or even wrong physics. It's a case where a 3-year-old boy appeared to be running data that, by every ordinary rule of biology, should never have been his to have. Most reality glitches are nothing more than the human brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. Filling gaps, matching patterns, and quietly editing memories until they feel seamless. But a handful of them, a flatlined man reporting facts he shouldn't have accessed, a 3-year-old naming a dead sailor's real friend, a 100-year-old solar event witnessed by tens of thousands, have never been fully closed out by science. Maybe that's the real glitch, not that reality breaks, but that we still don't fully understand the rules it's supposedly following. If the idea of a 3-year-old remembering a real World War II pilot's life gave you chills, wait until you see our next video on documented reincarnation cases investigated by actual universities. Drop a comment. Which glitch on this list genuinely creeped you out the most? And if you've personally experienced a Mandela Effect moment, tell us below. We might feature it in part 2.